Apparently, according to the statement provided by the Togolese authorities, Burkina has officially petitioned Togo to obtain his extradition. And Togo has respected certain principles that led our country to proceed, therefore, first to the arrest of Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba and to place him at the disposal of the judicial authorities of Burkina Faso. There is an official statement on the matter. I won't be able to read the entire statement, but I would like to read the first and I believe the fourth paragraph and allow you, dear guests, to provide your analysis and also allow our viewers to better understand the situation. The government statement says this: on January 12, 2026, the competent Togolese authorities received an extradition request made by the judicial authorities of the Republic of Burkina Faso targeting Mr. Damiba Paul-Henri Sandaogo of Burkinabe nationality, prosecuted on charges of embezzlement, criminal misappropriation of public funds, criminal illicit enrichment, corruption, incitement to commit offenses and crimes, aggravated receiving of stolen goods, and money laundering. That's what the first paragraph says, and so formally, these are the charges brought against Damiba by Burkina Faso. Togo examined this in accordance with the rules on the matter. And the fourth paragraph says this: the investigating chamber of the Lomé Court of Appeal was then seized of the case. Following its public hearing held on January 16th, 2026.
All Africans at home and across the global African family, welcome. Today is Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. My name is Akosua Prempeh, and I am broadcasting from United States of Africa TV, your trusted platform dedicated to truth, African unity, sovereignty, and the collective rise of our great continent. In today's important update, we are focusing on a major development involving Togo and Burkina Faso. After reports confirmed the arrest and extradition of former Burkinabe leader Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba back to Burkina Faso. According to an official statement from Togolese authorities, Burkina Faso submitted a formal extradition request, and Damiba is facing serious accusations linked to financial crimes, including the alleged misuse of public funds, illicit enrichment, corruption, and money laundering. The statement also highlights that legal procedures were followed and that there were guarantees regarding his rights, including a fair trial and the absence of the death penalty. This situation has raised many questions across the continent, not only about justice and accountability, but also about regional security, political transitions, and the responsibility of African states to protect stability while respecting human rights and the rule of law. So, my people, stay with us, because this report gives powerful insight into how African nations are responding to political crises and allegations of destabilization. Before the video begins, please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this broadcast, because when we share African stories with truth and clarity, we strengthen unity and help connect Africans everywhere. Now, let's watch the report.
And we are back on set for the final part of this program. We're moving on to our fourth topic. We're now talking about Togo, Damiba arrested and handed over to Burkina Faso. Former Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, former president of the Faso, the author of the coup against Rochmark Christian Kabore, and also a victim of Captain Ibrahim Traore's coup, was therefore exiled in Togo since his fall from power in September 2022. He has been accused for some time now of acts of destabilization in Burkina. We were talking about it on this set, in fact, just last week with the caution of Captain Ibrahim Traore, who announced discussions with the Togolese authorities, but was being careful, not wanting to say everything clearly. Apparently, according to the statement provided by the Togolese authorities, Burkina has officially petitioned Togo to obtain his extradition. And Togo has respected certain principles that led our country to proceed, therefore, first to the arrest of Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba and to place him at the disposal of the judicial authorities of Burkina Faso. There is an official statement on the matter. I won't be able to read the entire statement, but I would like to read the first and I believe the fourth paragraph and allow you, dear guests, to provide your analysis and also allow our viewers to better understand the situation. The government statement says this: On January 12, 2026, the competent Togolese authorities received an extradition request made by the judicial authorities of the Republic of Burkina Faso targeting Mr. Damiba Paul Henri Sandaogo of Burkinabe nationality, prosecuted on charges of embezzlement, criminal misappropriation of public funds, criminal illicit enrichment, corruption, incitement to commit offenses and crimes, aggravated receiving of stolen goods, and money laundering. That's what the first paragraph says, and so formally, these are the charges brought against Damiba by Burkina Faso. Togo examined this in accordance with the rules on the matter. And the fourth paragraph says this: the investigating chamber of the Lomé Court of Appeal was then seized of the case. Following its public hearing held on January 16th, 2026, this jurisdiction gave a favorable opinion to the request thus introduced on the basis of the offer of reciprocity from the Burkinabe authorities, international instruments to which Togo is a party, and the guarantees offered by these authorities regarding the respect for physical integrity and the dignity of the gentleman Paul Henri Sandaogo Damiba regarding his rights during the proceedings, notably that of a fair trial and the absence of the death penalty. Precisely after having analyzed this, Togo proceeded, it is said, after a favorable opinion from the investigating chamber. Mr. Paul Henri Sandaogo Damiba was handed over to the authorities of the Republic of Burkina Faso on January 17th, 2026. It is this press release dated January 19th, 2026, which provides these details. As you know, we have talked about it several times. Paul Henri Sandaogo Damiba is targeted by the Burkinabe authorities, who have accused him of being behind certain destabilization actions. He was in exile in Togo, and here is Togo handing him over to the Burkinabe judicial authorities. As you know, for the fourth topic, the floor is open to anyone who wants to start with their analysis and observations. Dear guests, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Adama can start.
Yes, I think that Paul Henri Damiba, who served as the former transitional president, or as some may refer to him, the leader of the MPSR, depending on the perspective or the context in which one chooses to address him, is the individual in question here.
He is the former transitional president, of course.
Absolutely. He has put Togo in a very uncomfortable position. First, you said it when you spoke earlier, but you will notice that in reality, the comments being spread here and there. And as they said, when you look at the authorities, at least the Burkinabe ones, you should have noticed that in reality, in the official statement from the Togolese government, there was at least not a single line that spoke or speaks of the destabilization mentioned by Burkina. Since it wasn't the first time, I think the most recent act was more explicit, because there we tried to demonstrate certain factual elements that could, in any case, prove Damiba's involvement.
With people's testimonies.
Exactly. I think Togo has been quite cautious, and as I was saying earlier, President Damiba has put Togo in an uncomfortable situation. Since for ages, Togo has always been considered a welcoming land, at least for most refugees. I think if we want to do a recap, I think that the time allotted for analysis won't really be enough for us to talk about all those who found refuge in Togo until things calm down in their respective countries, and who left in any case without being troubled. And today, if Damiba, in any case, is one of the few authorities to be extradited, it's because there are real motivations that push Togo to make such a decision. Otherwise, as I said earlier, it's not the first time that Damiba has been pointed out as being part of, in any case, the situations of instability in Burkina Faso. But I think it's the more economic motives that were brought up. And when we talk about economic motives, it's because in reality, we need to hear from Damiba on those aspects. But unfortunately, the Burkinabe environment until now, it's the first time at least, to my knowledge, that we can say that Damiba was therefore accused, at least of money laundering or economic motives, such as suggested by the press release. But in a way, Togo is responding at least to a pressing grievance from Burkina Faso. It's Burkina that said it. And today, given the development of our countries, if it's the case that we show motives that are quite convincing, and I think that was the case, because when we compare, at least since the authorities, at least the Burkinabe ones, started by mentioning the extradition then of Damiba. Togo has never at least had to be able to therefore even comment on that issue. That would mean in a way that there was no valid motive for Togo to be able to extradite him. Or I was thinking that in reality there hasn't been a direct formulation as such requesting the extradition then of Damiba by mentioning then these tangible motives for extradition. And it's the first time that it's been done. And I think the economic motives are at least those that are mentioned. But we must still, let's not hide this issue of instability, which has always been the big question that was put forward to talk then about the extradition then of the former Burkinabe president. But I think this last act, that's why I was saying Damiba put Togo in an uncomfortable position. Because in a way, since it's for the third time, right, at least, unless my counter isn't up to date, it's the third time that we've mentioned issues of destabilization linked to Damiba. And so if this last time, even if we aren't experts to be able to truly see if what was mentioned in a factual way was true, we know that there were testimonies that clearly mentioned Damiba's name as being one of the instigators. Then if that's the case, if Togo didn't react, I think Burkina is within its rights to be able to say that it is Togo is in the process of plotting with Damiba to oppose a destabilization in Burkina Faso. So that's how we understand at least the Togolese decision to be able to extradite Damiba to avoid being able to point to our country as being one of Damiba's supporters to carry out destabilization actions at the level of Burkina. Now, the economic motives mentioned.
Except that the motives mentioned by Togo to extradite him, you pointed it out at the beginning. We don't see security or destabilization motives. Because in Burkina, they're talking about collusion with terrorist groups, terrorist maneuvers. They're talking about destabilization. They're talking about coup attempts. There was talk of support coming from Ivory Coast and so on. Maybe it's the financial support from Ivory Coast that Togo was able to verify. We don't know. But Togo's statement focuses much more on economic issues. He's accused, according to the statement, of criminal embezzlement of public funds, criminal illicit enrichment. So all of that, it's money matters, corruption, incitement to commit offenses and crimes, aggravated receiving. Well, incitement to commit offenses and crimes, we don't know exactly what they included in that. We don't know if that's what's linked to terrorist groups, to destabilization issues, aggravated receiving, and money laundering. Most of the charges are economic charges.
Yes, well, naturally, because somewhere as well, because as you said, the motives mentioned are economic, but also if we look back at history, everyone who was questioned regarding destabilization motives, the big question that comes up very often, and we've seen it, because it was shown to everyone, it was still bags full of money, and in the end, they're caught red-handed. It would mean somewhere that these economic motives mentioned also overlap because it's an economic issue and the financial issue, which are the primary drivers behind the whole issue of destabilization. So for us, the two issues overlap, but the very heart of the matter is the economic issue. And in the background, it's the issue of destabilization, because somewhere financial support has always been one of the motives mentioned by Burkina Faso to talk about destabilization. So for me, the two issues overlap.
Thank you very much, Adam Adjono. So Ezi Edo, Togo has finally extradited Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba. The official statement was released on January 19th. The statement, as I just read it, explains the situation and Togo's position, Togo's process leading up to his extradition to Burkina.
Yes, I think that when we read this statement from Togo, we should ask ourselves some important questions. Togo specifically mentions economic issues more frequently, while on the Burkina Faso side, the security issue is mentioned more often. So the question I asked myself while reading the government's statement regarding the charges brought against the former transitional president of Burkina is to know at what point he committed these crimes, rather, that he's accused of today. Did he commit them before leaving Burkina, or did he commit them from his position here in Lomé? That's the question I'm asking myself. So if he committed them before leaving Burkina, why is it at this precise moment that they are requesting his extradition with these specific charges? That is one question. Now, if he committed them from his position in Togo, how did he manage to do it? I ask these questions because if Togo mentions economic crimes, while on the other side they speak more of destabilization motives, and we finally find ourselves in a situation where Damiba must be extradited, it would mean that in reality there is something fishy going on. Something fishy in the sense that, no country would like to host someone who is, organizing a coup from that country. And I also find it curious that in any case, taking into account what the Burkinabe authorities have mentioned regarding destabilization motives, I find it curious in the sense that Damiba, it's not up to us to tell Damiba. Damiba knows very well and is aware of the relations that exist between Togo and Burkina Faso, at least with the current authorities of Burkina Faso. And so if he is obviously aware of these relations and allows himself to organize a destabilization from here in Lomé, it would mean that beforehand he exposed himself. And so that's why I find it curious nonetheless. But I still have this question. At what point did Damiba commit these crimes? And now that the Burkinabe authorities are talking about destabilization and Togo in turn mentions economic issues, on what basis will Damiba be judged now in Burkina when he arrives in Burkina? That is the big question that I think deserves answers, except that right now we cannot find answers to this question. But I also see Togo's caution. To mention a coup attempt immediately or without delay in one way or another would mean Togo exposes itself as a host country for ill-intentioned people. However, Adam just said it, Togo has hosted many people, and so Togo is not in reality this country that shelters ill-intentioned people. And so I believe it's a somewhat complex situation, complex in the sense that the versions of the two authorities are not the same. And it's true, it was yesterday that Togo released its statement. The Burkinabe authorities haven't yet, at least to my knowledge, they haven't yet commented on what Togo said, or even tell us specifically what fate is in store for Damiba today. And my fear is that, as you know, Burkina Faso recently reinstated the death penalty. And when we talk about destabilizing the country, it's classified as high treason. And high treason in Burkina, given the current situation, means you're potentially facing the death penalty.
Togo, in any case, has obtained guarantees, at least according to the statement, that there will be no death penalty.
Exactly. That's why I'm questioning it, or at least why I'm mentioning what Togo said, because Togo talks about the economy while on the other side, that's not what's being said. It's true, Togo has obtained guarantees. Now, does Togo have the capacity or the power in case Damiba ends up being someone who upon arriving in Burkina is found guilty of, the charges brought by the Burkinabe authorities? Of course, it's not yet the Burkinabe justice system that has raised these issues of motives for destabilizing the country. But when he's in court and they eventually hand down these sentences, does Togo have the power, the capacity regarding...
To go and get him back?
Not necessarily to go and get him back. Getting him back isn't easy. I'm talking about this guarantee that Togo received regarding the death penalty. Will Togo ultimately be able to rely on this guarantee? That's the big question. The fact remains that today there's still some uncertainty surrounding this extradition. But the reality is that Damiba has been extradited. Now, what fate awaits Damiba? I believe that in the coming days, the Burkinabe authorities will help us understand. And I also believe that with this extradition, the Burkinabe authorities will no longer speak in the coming days of a possible attempted coup, because it was when Damiba was here that it was discussed, which to me reflects a certain insecurity within, insecurity or even fear on the part of Ibrahim Traoré, because he's in power and yet he constantly mentions coup attempts. Well, it's believed that Damiba was involved. Now that Damiba has been extradited and is in their hands, we'll see if there are any more coup attempts in the coming days. And if there are any to whom they will be attributed. Adrien Huno.
Yes, I think that on the issue of the death penalty, Togo has received guarantees. And I think the question remains open because the charges, at least according to the press release, but also because they are the charges repeatedly mentioned by Burkina Faso, are in any case accusations of high treason. Because in a way, when you touch public funds, it is a crime regardless.
Yes, but it is not classified here as high treason. In any case, any label can be used except high treason.
Yes, so far, yes, it is Togo's press release that spoke to us about economic and financial issues. But since then, Burkina Faso has only spoken of treason, that is to say, high treason. That is why I say to myself, and I agree with Isai who said it earlier, does Togo have the possibility and the capacity to actually control, in any case, the classification of the accusations brought against Damiba? I am not sure. Because in a way, it is one thing to sign agreements in principle to obtain extradition, but it is another thing to implement those agreements on the ground. Because for Burkina Faso, it is precisely about ensuring that Damiba can answer to these accusations that are today attributed to him. But I think there will be more charges, naturally, regarding the issues of destabilization. Because in a way, I was thinking, these things overlap. It means that in some way, Damiba was able to set aside a huge amount of money. But apart from the governance he managed, Damiba, at least when we look back at history, has never been a businessman or had business units to produce enough money for him to carry out destabilization actions on Burkinabe territory. But be that as it may, I think that based on this trust, we can still grant the benefit of the doubt that since Damiba was a former leader of the country, there is a need to preserve the image and ensure that he does not suffer from the capital punishment as reinstated by the Burkinabe institutions.
In the process of being reinstated since the issue was discussed in the Council of Ministers. So is Togo handing over Damiba in a matter of a witch hunt? Because following your reasoning, it seems a bit like that. Since the Burkinabe authorities speak of security issues, the Togolese authorities speak at least of essentially economic issues, but still manage to hand over Damiba to Burkina Faso. Oh, handing over Damiba to Burkina Faso, I don't think it's really appropriate or justified to use that term. Handing over, I don't think so. In any case, if we stick to the government's official press releases regarding the charges that have been brought against Lieutenant Colonel Damiba, it is quite normal and expected that someone who is alleged to have committed these crimes should be questioned in order to answer for his actions. Plus, it's normal. I think a Togolese in another country would find themselves in a similar situation. Togo will request his extradition. It's completely normal, because when we talk about economic crimes, just imagine the impact on the country, on the country's development. We're talking about public funds here, which means that when we talk about public funds, it's money that belongs to all the citizens of Burkina. And so if an individual allows themselves to appropriate or take away money that belongs to an entire country, it's important and essential that they be questioned to answer for their actions and actually return this money if there's a possibility of doing so. And so talking about delivery, I don't think so. That's why, in fact, I'm a bit...
You prefer extradite?
Yes, extradite.
Yes, extradite. Okay.
Yes, extradite. Yes, it's the appropriate term, actually. But I still remain a bit confused about the situation. Did the Burkinabe authorities not play on economic charges to get precisely Togo to extradite Damiba? Because when it comes to a coup d'etat...
Essential preparation.
Exactly. It will be necessary to provide evidence that that actually shows there was a coup d'etat, an attempted coup d'etat. But then again, should we talk about an attempted coup d'etat? I think instead we should talk about the preparation of a coup d'etat. Because...
Since they haven't tried yet.
Exactly. An attempt is when there was, they tried and it didn't work. So here we can talk about of the preparation of a coup d'etat. But then again, the evidence would have to be provided. That's why I say, did the Burkinabe authorities not use... And then again, I think it's serious for the Burkinabe authorities, to play on that, to get Damiba, and finally...
If it's a matter of giving charges that are different from what they actually want to do,
Exactly. I believe that on a judicial level, it would be very poorly received for the Burkinabe authorities now if once in Burkina they'll try to rely precisely on these economic charges to make the link with the preparation of a coup d'etat, as Adam was saying just now. Because someone who has the means can easily prepare a coup d'etat as well, because a coup d'etat requires a lot of means. And so if afterwards they still manage to establish the link between the charges that are relayed by Togo and the destabilization, then we can understand. But the fact remains that there's something fishy going on. There's still an equation for which we must find answers. And I think that Damiba today must be asking himself 1,000 questions. What fate will be in store for him? And obviously the Burkinabe people, but don't forget as well that Damiba still has his relatives in Burkina. So a death sentence, the capital punishment for Damiba, could still lead to other situations for Burkina.
Thank you to all of you for your contributions.
You, Doc.
Perhaps you'll give your closing remarks then, Adam Ajono, since we're at the end of this edition of Regards Croisé. So,
okay. No, what I wanted to add, because the complexity of the case is quite evocative, for the simple reason that I think since Togo obtained guarantees on at least the extradition grounds mentioned, and specifically on economic grounds. Now, if there's a reclassification of the effects on grounds of destabilization, which are considered in reality as being crimes of high treason, I think that Togo won't have, in any case, grounds to talk about the fact that the word was not kept. Because we can reclassify everything or add other crimes with certain evidence they'll have anyway. But the main thing is that we can grant him a fairly equitable justice that can therefore provide elements to justify. Now, speaking of my closing remarks, I wanted to...
Those weren't your closing remarks? Quickly then.
In fact, to invite the students today, it's true that the caution requested by the educational authorities as well as other authorities is required in large urban areas where caution is required, when we consider in any case the users of those roads. But when you go into the small alleys, you see the students behaving as if they're no longer afraid, in any case, of the users of those roads. So they behave as if they were the masters of the road. It's still necessary that this caution could also be evocative to avoid accidents in large urban areas as well as in the alleys.
Thank you very much, Adam Ajono. You're a journalist and political analyst. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Doctor.
Esayi Edo, your closing remarks.
Yes, my closing remarks are a call to action. Maybe in the coming days we'll come back to it. It's regarding the different ministries, the different ministerial departments. There's a fact currently, which is that most ministries take the time to organize ceremonies to present their best wishes to the minister. I think that we can do it without any fanfare, do it quickly, and move on to something else. Because it's become a publicized event, as if it were a major concern or an essential fact of the life of the country. But I think we can do it quietly and get to work quickly. We are already...
You're talking about the communication aspect.
Exactly. We are in mid-January. We need to get to work regarding the budget and leave those little things there and then get to work quickly there.
Thank you very much, Esayi Edo. You're a journalist at Focus Info. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, my brothers and sisters, for staying with us on United States of Africa TV. This story is not just about one individual. It touches on deeper issues about leadership accountability, regional cooperation, and whether Africa is truly building systems that protect citizens, defend sovereignty, and promote peace across our nations. As Africans, we must continue to demand governance that is transparent, justice that is fair, and politics that does not divide or destroy our countries. We must also stay alert because instability in one African nation can quickly affect the whole region. Now, I want to hear from you, our powerful and respected audience across Africa and the global African family. Please share your thoughts in the comments section and let your voice be part of this important continental discussion. Question 1. Do you believe Togo made the right decision by extraditing Damiba to Burkina Faso, or should he have remained in exile? Question 2. Should African nations prioritize security and stability first, even when political cases are sensitive, or should they focus more on protecting political asylum and diplomacy? Drop your comments below and let's discuss with respect, wisdom, and unity. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. And invite someone else to join this movement for African truth and African unity.